Big Podcast.
It's Big Podcast Playbook, the marketing podcast for podcasters. My name is David Hooper. BigPodcast.com is the site. This is the podcast for you if you want to grow your podcast, if you want to make a podcast that people care about, if you want to make more money with your podcast, make a podcast that makes impact, make a podcast that people will miss if you disappear, make a podcast that makes your mother proud, and make a podcast that you know is worth all the effort that you're putting into. It takes a lot of effort to make a good podcast. This one's a two-parter. If you're going to do an interview format podcast, you've got to have a guest and you got to have a host. You can't have one or the other. You've got to have both. How do you become a great host? And what makes a great guest? We'll tackle the first part of this here on this episode. How do you become a great podcast host? Kim Coda out of Boston has sent this list to me. I think this is something maybe off social media. It looks like it was a thread where somebody asked guest and host, what makes a good guest? What makes a good host? She says, I'd like your opinion on this. Kim, you're in the right place. If you notice, that's what a lot of podcasts are, just opinions. But with me, having produced, hosted, monologued, booked, edited, pre-interviewed, hundreds and hundreds of guests, hundreds of episodes, I got a little something in my head. It's getting ready to come out of my mouth that I would argue is worth listening to. So let's check it out. Let's talk about great host. This is how one person describes it. It's understanding your role. As a moderator, your job is to shape and guide the story arc for the audience, create the container for your panelists to shine, and listen to what's not being said in order to elevate that which will enrich the discussion. It's about having the self-awareness to listen and contribute to the conversation without centering yourself. That sounds like a panelist moderator to me. And that could be the same thing if you've got more than one guest. Let me talk about that first. I don't like having more than one guest. I especially don't like having more than one guest if one person is at a different level than the other person. And let me give you an example of that. It could be that you've got a famous author who wants to bring a spouse along. What's the spouse doing there? Is the spouse part of that famous author's contribution? I don't know, maybe, but do you want behind the scenes? Do you want to hear from the author himself or herself? I had that happen to me. A very well-known business author, he and his wife put out a book. I was not interested in that book. I wanted to know about the books he'd done prior to that. I wanted to go deeper in his career than this one book that he just so happened to do with his wife. I told the publicist, yeah, I'll do the interview, but here's how I want to do it. I'm not going to do the same interview that you've done in this press junket, because these guys are going around everywhere. This guy, in fact, he's known for doing an interview a day, so he's done a ton of interviews. I'm not going to do that. What I want to do is I want to put together an episode with you, the author, interviewing just him, and then the co-author, his wife, separately asking, what was it like to work with him? What was that writing process like? What's the publishing process like? Where did you come up with the idea? You've had solo books too. What was different about this co-authored book than what you'd done previously? I'm not going to insult the lady, and that's why I didn't want to have them both there. It wasn't giving her enough time to talk about her contribution to this, because everybody wants to hear from the big dog. He's the only reason she's there. And this works out in a number of different ways. I'll give you another example. I had a publicist friend of mine. She says, I've got this guy. He owns a club. He can also bring in this guy, a very famous musician. You got to take them both. This guy's a famous musician. So I took them both. And the club guy, he was fine, but I really wanted the musician. This is what they call a ride along, sidecar, or a value meal. All right, fine, let's do it. The little dude, he said, oh man, don't get him talking about this stuff. No, he just go on and on and on about it. I said, man, that's what I want. Now you're messing with my interview. There's ways to work this stuff out during editing. You can literally take one person out of the interview. Maybe you've got a place for them. You can do both. But it's very hard to have one guy who's done 50 years of rock and roll, multi-platinum records, arena tours, songs that if I mentioned, you would know. And I'm not going to mention because I don't want to give away the other guy. Have that big dude combined with a little dude who's just an investor in a club. Look, I'm not saying that's not important. That is important. We've got to have investors. But It just doesn't make sense. Everybody wants to hear from one guest, not the second dude. So you've got to stop the conversation that everybody wants. Say, oh yeah, by the way, what did you think about this? Where did you get the money for this club? Nobody cares about that. Just like nobody would care about the second author on a book where she or he is a co-author. They want to talk to the big guy. No guest differential, meaning you don't have a big guest and a not so big guest on the same episode. Could you have two people? Yeah, sometimes that's going to work. Let's say I got Simon and Garfunkel. Great. Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley of Kiss. Either one of them are going to work solo. They could be great together. There's no differential there. These are partnerships. Those are great. But if you got somebody that you really want to interview and there's a sidecar on there, a value meal, no. To take it back to the letter, when you talk about creating the container for your panelists, or in this case, guests to shine, sometimes that's separating them from a publicist. Absolutely never, ever, ever have a publicist or PR person, one, tell you what to do. I've had him sit in the studio with me, ask about this. No, he's not going to talk about that. Don't tell me how to do my interviews. No. Can you imagine Howard Stern or Larry King, these great television, radio interviews, having a publicist tell them what to ask? No. Or interrupting an interview. He's not going to talk about that. No. The guest can decide what he wants to talk about. Let's talk about setting the space. Or again, as this guy said, create the container for your panelists to shine. A pre-interview does that. People say, I don't have time for a pre-interview. They're not going to give me a pre-interview. I've seen people write this. Don't you trust me that I'm going to bring my full authentic self and my authority to the podcast? Yeah, I do. What I'm trying to do is build rapport with you. Have a pre-interview. Let people know they can be comfortable in your space. That's setting the space. That's what the pre-interview is for. It's not saying I'm going to ask you this, 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 and this. It's hanging out, man. It's letting them get to know you. Asking them, you got any questions about this? Some people have never done a podcast interview, never done a radio interview. You're setting the space. When I have somebody come into the studio with me, I take them around. Hey, man, take a look at this. This is the business office. Check out these gold records on the wall. Look at this. I got a floor that lights up in one of the studios that I work with, kind of like a Michael Jackson thing. Billie Jean. Check that out, man. Let's get a video of that for your social media. Let's take some photos of this. I'm setting the space for them to shine, letting them know, yeah, this is real radio, man. We're getting ready to get behind these mics and you're talking to me, but I want energy. And you're doing that without actually saying it. What you're doing is treating them like what? A guest. That's what they are, a guest. You're bringing them into your space. You've done the pre-interview. You built the rapport. You're showing them the studio. And the subtext of that is, this is important. Show up on time. Come correct. Bring your best self. And let's do something amazing together. When I talk about setting the space, that's you at the very beginning of that being well rested. When the mic comes on, here's the show. Hey, man, it's David Hooper here, coming to you from Nashville, Tennessee. I've got a fantastic guest. Kim Koda is with me. She's an expert on what makes a great guest and what makes a great host. We're going to dive into those things on this podcast. You set the space by doing something like that. Contribute to the conversation without centering yourself. Yeah, kind of. No, it's not about you. But you are the driver of this interview. And yeah, you are going through a story arc, taking that guest from beginning, middle, and end. You're wrapping that thing up with a nice bow, giving people a very pleasing experience that is complete and leaves them satisfied. You're guiding the guest through that. You're the chauffeur, the Sherpa. But that doesn't mean it's about you. Again, this person is your guest. When I bring somebody into the studio, I'm assuming they've never been into it. I'm saying, this is the deal, man. Be excited. I'm glad to have you here. Aren't you excited to be here? The energy starts with you. You're playing the flag. You're bringing the energy, and they follow. They're coming up to you. That's why you do that pre-interview. So when they see you for the show, for the episode that you're taping, they already know you a little bit. They know that they can trust you. And then by the time you get into that studio, you hit that red button, mics are hot, that's when they can deliver. That's setting the space. That's what makes a great host. Let me get to the second thing. My personal pet peeve is when they try to run through a list of questions without stopping for natural flow, follow-up, or deeper conversation. That should be obvious, but it's not. Let me take you back 20-something years when I was starting music business radio. This is why I have a lot of music examples, by the way. Worked in the music business for a number of years. Musicmarketing.com was my company. Huge music conference, 400 to 450 acts per year. I've worked with a lot of acts over the years. I've done a lot of media on the hosting side, getting people media. I've seen it from all sides, good, bad, and ugly. There are a lot of podcasters, no doubt, they have a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, however many questions that they go through. Some of them are going to do that on multiple episodes, the same question regardless of who the guests are. If you need that crutch to get started, go for it. You're going to get better. I trust you. Don't stay there long. And do trust yourself. If somebody says, well, that's the time then they give you a story, follow up on that. Don't just ask them, what's your favorite success quote? What app have you recently put on your phone and really enjoyed? Don't stop in the middle of the conversation, man, but do what you need to do to get started. You can't be a great host without starting. There's a bad host and a good host, a little better host. Eventually you work your way to great. So don't let that stop you from doing an interview altogether. But with that said, part of interviewing is listening. I did a thing with Claude McKnight. You might know him as Brian McKnight's brother. And Claude's a neat guy. He's in a band called Take Six, kind of a gospel acapella thing, jazz fusion. It's pretty complicated. You ever seen the show Martin Lawrence? They did the theme song. You can look it up on YouTube. Very complicated vocal arrangements, no instrumentation behind them a lot of times. A great singer, and you can imagine being a great singer. It's a lot like being a great podcaster. And this is the answer that he gave me as to why. I said, how are you a great singer? What makes a great singer? He said, to be a great singer, you've got to be a great listener. Same with being a great podcast host. You want to be a great podcast host? You got to be a great listener. When somebody says something, you follow up on that. And that's not just listening. Listening is the first part of it. That lets you know when to follow up. But you've got to be great at improvising, thinking on your feet. The things that I'm talking about, building rapport. It's not about plugging in a mic. It's not about having a radio voice or phrasing. All that stuff is great. But it's about letting that person be your guest. From the pre-interview to the pre-work that you do before you bring somebody into a studio. And by the way, if you're doing a remote interview, you can still do that. Make sure they know how to plug in the mic. Make sure they don't have any questions or have their questions answered about that aspect of things, the technological aspect of it. Be in a quiet room. You got a walk-in closet. It's got some clothes in it. Perfect. That's great. That's going to be a little more quiet than the rest of the house. You've got clothing hanging down from racks. That's actually going to absorb the noise reflections. You're going to sound a whole lot better than you would outside of that closet. Educate these people on that. That's how you become a great host. The flow, the follow-up, the deeper conversation, that's going to happen eventually. Great hosts aren't born, they are made. To be a great host, you got to be a good host. To be a good host, you got to be a bad host. Arnold Schwarzenegger has a saying. He said, abs are made in the kitchen. Meaning, you do all the sit-ups you want, crunches you want. If you're not eating good food, watching your calories, giving yourself a good foundation, all the exercise in the world is not going to help you. Abs are made in the kitchen. Same thing with your podcast. A great podcast, a great interview, great episode, all parts of a podcast are made with planning. I got another part of this topic. It is about being a great guest. On the next episode, I'm going to be flipping this. What does it take for you to be a great guest? To make sure that you do not miss it, this is what to do. Go to bigpodcast.com/subscribe. I've made it very easy for you to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. There are 3 buttons there. One for iPhone, one for Android, one is an RSS feed. Listen on iPhone, click the iPhone button. If you listen to podcasts on an Android device, boom, Android button. And if you want an old-fashioned RSS feed because you are a podcaster and you know what that is, very few people outside podcasting do. But you, yeah, you know what it is. And that's why it's there. Bigpodcast.com/subscribe. One click is all it takes. You will never miss an episode. And you'll get part 2 of this discussion, the flip side, how to be a great guest. Thanks to Kim Coda for sending this in. If you got thoughts on what you want to hear from me, let me know, man. You can reach out to me at bigpodcast.com. If you want to work with me, I've got something called AMP, A-M-P, Audio Monetization Program. You will find that. Yeah, that's right. Bigpodcast.com. Thanks for listening to Big Podcast Playbook. Did you subscribe yet? Well, if you did, I'm going to see you on the next episode.